We begin the last session now. Sumana Chandrasekhar is a Ghatam player, writer, and researcher studying under Vidushi Sukanya Ramgopal. With a background in Carnatic vocal music, she explores the histories of languages, migration, and musical confluences. She has performed extensively across India and collaborated on experimental music projects, working closely with artist communities. Thank you so much for coming here today. Let me first invite Professor Rakesh Basant to present a stole. And with that, over to you.
Namaskara and a very good evening to all of you. It's a great honor for me to be here amidst all of you at the third edition of the History Literature Festival. Thank you so much. In my 15-year journey with the Ghatam, there have been two questions that have concerned me the most. The first one is an intense curiosity about the antecedents and the whole universe around this clay pot that I play. To understand its materiality, the people who make it, the experience that, to experience that moment when an ordinary pot becomes a musical pot. The second question is to do with my own identity. Who are my ancestors? What is my lineage as a Ghatam player, and more specifically as a woman Ghatam player? In India, as all of you would know, we have an incredible corpus of music histories that have been written for over a century. And yet, what are the chances that one would find the story of an instrument that on one hand is a mere ordinary object that is so familiar, and on the other hand has been considered only a minor or a secondary instrument in classical music? Evidently, when I looked back into the past with these questions, there was little I could find. And it was at this point that my questions got further compounded. What and whose histories get written about? How are these choices made? Who writes these histories? What is spoken and what is left unspoken? What is written and what remains unwritten? What stories exist only in whispers? And where do these stories lie? We go to the next slide. So when formal documentation did not shine much light on the history of the Ghatam, I had to walk into the so-called bylanes of history, into reminiscences, into oral narratives, anecdotes, mythologies, even erasures, and finally into pedagogy and my own practice as a woman student of the country's first woman Ghatam player. A pursuit into these questions is what has brought me to this presentation today, which I have titled Between Spoken Words and Silences, a practitioner's search into the story of the Ghatam. Next slide, please. Now, before I outline the story of the Ghatam, let me first contextualize the instrument. As you would know, pot drums are as old as mankind. And they have been part of almost all musical cultures across the world. You see them in North America, in South America, in Africa, and of course, all over Asia. And within India too, we have an incredible variety of pot drums. These could be open pots, like the one that you see here, or they may be covered with leather, with parchment paper, and more recently with plastic. They are played with fingers, with rings on fingers, a piece of leather or an object that strikes the surface of the pot, or sometimes even by blowing into the pot. Although some of these pots have specific names, as you can see here, it's called the matka, the matki, noot, Tumbaknari, Ghummat, Villupat, Dhankul. These are just a few names that I'm listing here, but there's any number of them across the country. But they are also often known by their generic name, which is Ghat, Ghata, Ghada, all of which simply means a pot. So when we are talking about the Ghatam, we are talking about one pot which is part of a large family of pot drums that exist across this subcontinent. The Ghatam refers specifically to the clay pot that is used in Carnatic or South Indian classical music. And this is also the only pot that the state has brought within the ambit of quote-unquote classical, while all other pot drums in India operate within the realm of the folk. The problematics of what is classical and what is folk is, of course, for another conversation. We can go to the next slide. More often than not, music histories are written from the point of view of artists, while the makers mostly figure on the margins of these narratives. However, today we start the story of the Ghatam with the makers. And there are two reasons for this. One is that the musical life of the pot actually starts with the makers themselves. The Ghatam makers that I have known for all these years have all had a musical legacy within their families for at least 100 years. And they have all used the pots that they make in the music that they make as well. The second reason is that a particular style of playing the Ghatam that in time becomes tradition is informed first by the aesthetic and material choices of the maker and their imagination of sound, and only later by the artist. Now, for instance, the specific style of playing that I have inherited from my guru and she from her guru is informed by the robustness of this spot from a place called Mana Madurai. When I started playing the Ghatam 15 years ago, there were three major centers where the Ghatams were made. As you can see here, there's Devanahalli, Mana Madurai, and Chennai. Before we come to these three places, there were actually many more places that made musical pots. They were made in Pondicherry, Kanyakumari, Tirunelveli, Panruti, Vishakhapatnam, and so many more. We've lost many of these places to excessive urbanization. In fact, of the three that are mentioned here, Devanahalli and Chennai are also almost out of commission. And while we are sitting in Bangalore, I must mention, we've all passed in and out of the Bangalore airport. So the Bangalore airport is technically in Devanahalli. And the airport is sitting on a large piece of land that was once pond and lake bed, and it was home to hundreds of families of potter, all of whom, or at least most of whom, have now relocated into the city. So the entire tradition of Devanahalli Ghatam making, and therefore the Devanahalli Ghatam playing tradition, is also, it's become a casualty now. So this is the kind of urbanization that I'm talking about. Well, it is what it is. And Mana Madurai, thankfully, is the only center that is flourishing today. We'll go to the next slide, please. This is really to give you a sense of who are the people that, that make the pot. On the right top, you see the two gentlemen there. That's the elderly gentleman is Gopal, and then there's his son Mahesh, who are both part of the Devanahalli tradition. This was some years ago when I met them. They'll no longer make Ghatams, I think, now. And the rest of the pictures are from Mana Madurai. The woman you see in the center is Meenakshi Amma, a master Ghatam maker, and she even won the Sangeet Natak Academy Award for her expertise in Ghatam making. And then the rest of them are her family and people from Mana Madurai. The gentleman you see on the left top is Meenakshi Amma's son, Ramesh, who's currently the master Ghatam maker. The one thing that I'd like to draw your attention to here is that women play a big role in the making of the pots. So all the support roles and even some of the main roles are all played by women. And then here, there's the world out here that says percussion is generally male. Let's move to the next one, please. I have a little video here to share, but this is how the pot comes on to the stage. So let's watch the video. the last ghatam is broken, as you could hear from the sound. Now, whether it will be used on the concert stage or not, obviously can't be used in a concert, but in a few moments, maybe we'll see another story. One of the most frequent questions that come to me is, when did the ghatam come into Carnatic music? While we can say that the pot has been part of Carnatic music for about 150 to 180 years, we cannot define a singular moment. It seems to have been a gradual process that spanned nearly a century. The earliest documentation of pot drum players that I have been able to find is by a British Army officer named Charles Russell Day. Day was posted in India in the 1880s, and he traveled widely studying the music of India. In 1891, he published a book titled The Music and Musical Instruments of Southern India and the Deccan, and here he writes, "The veena is the favorite instrument and is generally accompanied by a maddala or tabla, or else a kind of earthen pot called gatha," and this is his spelling, "much like the ordinary chatti, which in the hands of a skillful performer is beaten with wonderful dexterity. Players manage to produce sounds of different pitch by striking it in different places. The performer usually sits cross-legged and holds the gatha between his thighs, striking it with his fingertips, the flat of his hand, and the fleshy part of the wrist. Players upon the gatha display great dexterity." Then we have the work of Abraham Panditar, who was a medical doctor and a musicologist from Tirunelveli, who published his seminal work called Karunamrita Sagaram in 1917. A part of this book is a directory of sorts and lists the names of a few hundred, quote unquote, experts in South Indian music with a few remarks on each. And this list features about 7 ghatam players of his time. The pot instrument also finds mention in the work of Herbert Arthur Popley, a British Christian missionary who was posted in Erode. In his book, The Music of India, which was published in 1921, Popley writes, "The Indian drummer can obtain the most fascinating rhythm from a mud pot, and some of them are great experts at this pot drumming." Now, we can't be entirely sure as to the context in which Day and Popley saw the ghatam being played. And as you know, ethnographers of those times, they just went about documenting everything that they saw. And the pot was easily an instrument that could have been played on the streets by street performers. But since Day mentions the veena, and the veena was never played on the streets, it was always played in more sophisticated settings. And because he mentions the veena, it's possible that the pot that he saw was in a royal court or in a salon setting. What is beautiful about the descriptions that both Day and Popley give us is that they seem to be quite fascinated by pot drummers. If there is one defining moment in the history of Carnatic music that changed the trajectory of the Ghatam, it is most certainly the nationalist movement. The nationalist movement that that intensified between 1928 and 1947 brought in major shifts in the theory and practice of Carnatic music. The nation-building exercise was multi-pronged. A newly emerging independent nation required a careful construction of quote-unquote the classical. And this, among other things, resulted in the formation of new relationships between instruments. The admiration that Day and Popley had for the Ghatam and the independent existence of the Ghatam that Day points to us was soon to change. The new theoretical texts that were written from 1929 well into the 50s and 60s begin by first classifying the Ghatam as a miscellaneous instrument and subsequently as an upapakavadya, arguably secondary percussion instrument. And the mridangam, which is a tunable pitched instrument, is elevated to the position of a pradhana layavadya, or the main percussion instrument. It is also called the national instrument of India. That's what they labeled the mridangam as. And the mridangam also became indispensable to a Carnatic concert, while an upapakavadya, which is the ghatam, the morching, and the khanjira, were instruments that could be easily dispensed with. And in the new hierarchy, the singer or the instrumentalist was ranked above everyone else. And the main artists, as they are called, this is followed by the violin, then you have the mridangam, then you have the khanjira, and position 5 was allocated to the ghatam. And this is a hierarchy that is followed in a conventional Carnatic concert even to this day. So you will see the main artist, either the singer or the instrumentalist, seated in the center. On either sides is the violin and the mridangam, and the ghatam or the morching or the khanjira player would be sitting diagonally behind on either sides of the main artist. So the spatial arrangement on stage is actually a reflection of what happened, of the relationships that were now, the new relationships that were formed between these instruments. Also, in the early years of the 20th century, we must remember that the mridangam and the khanjira were already established instruments, and the ghatam was still finding its feet in Carnatic music. And because the pot was always a common people's instrument, it was played in a variety of ways. For instance, there are photographs of some where the pot is turned upside down, or they would toss it in the air and play with different kinds of techniques. So the ghatam players of the early years were also experimenting with a lot of techniques. So the ghatam player was mostly seen as a jester, somebody who's given to gimmicks and clap tricks. He was invited to provide some sort of a comic relief in a serious musical discourse or a concert. Even in the decades of the 70s and 80s, ghatam players were considered incompetent or incapable of producing complex rhythms. Next slide, please. While all this was going on, ghatam players must have felt a really strong need to assert their identities. There are so many stories where ghatam players have resisted dominant forces and have been incredibly resilient when faced with difficult situations and challenges. Of these, there are 3 that are my favorite, which I would like to share here. On this side, you see the artist is Alangudi Ramachandran. Alangudi Ramachandran was M.S. Subbalakshmi's ghatam player for several years, a fantastic player. And one major thing that I'd like to mention here is that when the Music Academy in Madras was established in 1928, one of the directives with which they started was that we will not have any other percussion instrument except for the mridangam. So right from the start, the ghatam, the khanjira, and morching were banned in the Music Academy. And it was only in 1948, 20 years later, when after a hiatus, MS went back to sing in the academy, she insisted that she will sing only if her ghatam player is with her. And that's how Alangudi Ramachandran became the first person to play in the music academy. And for some of us here, music academy is really like the high citadel of Carnatic music. So Alangudi was the man who accompanied MS in that concert, and for several years he was the one who played with her. What he would do is that, and we must remember that these were the years when ghatam was not really such a respected instrument, although there were some people who really loved it. There were people in the audiences, people who have recollected memories of watching a ghatam player and being fascinated by him. There are all these stories, but in general and in theory, the ghatam was not such a big instrument. While all this was happening, Alangudi would place an advertisement in the Kalki magazine. Kalki is a very famous, very popular in those days. It was a magazine that came out in Tamil. And he would occasionally place these ads where he's sitting playing the ghatam, and it's got a wish for Pongal or something like that. And it's got his address, and his telegram address is ghatam. And it was such a wonderful way of asserting himself. So that's one of my favorite stories. And on this side is a piece of writing by Kalki himself. Kalki Krishnamurti, as many of you might know, was a poet. He was a writer, critic, and he also was the one who founded the Kalki magazine. But in this, it's a small attachment to a larger paper. I think it's called Adal Padal, where he only did music reviews. And he wrote under the pen name Karnatakam. In this, he writes, and this is 1936. Well, this is 1950, Alangudi's. But in 1936, Kalki writes about a concert that the most appealing thing about this particular concert, both sonically and visually, was this ghatam player. And he describes the concert and so on. And finally he says, we need to have a movement to revive the ghatam. And imagine in 1936, he's already saying we need to revive the ghatam. So here's an example of a music lover who was deeply in love with this instrument, while that was not clearly the atmosphere at that time. Next one, please. This is another favorite of mine, and I think, and I like to call this the anthem for all ghatam players. This is Ghatam Sundaram Iyer. He was one of the key people who rallied for the formation of the Music Academy in 1927. Through the years, you know, the years that the running up to the establishment of the Music Academy, he was one of the key people. And finally, we know now that the Music Academy actually opened without having the ghatam. So at that point, he writes an article in Tamil, which is then translated into English and published posthumously in 1930 in the Music Academy Journal. And he makes a very fervent appeal for the revival of the ghatam. It's very heartwarming what he writes. It's also very poetic. And this is what he says. In other tala instruments, good and proper musical sound can be obtained only in specified places with specific methods of fingering. In ghata, wherever and in whatever manner you touch it, it can produce musical sound. Moreover, the instrument resembles earth in its globular shape. Just as earth has got certain climatic conditions from the North Pole to the South Pole, the sound differs in various places in between the poles of the pot. And then he goes on to say, give me a pot cracked but not broken, and I will still find out its strong and resonant points and display all the beauty of the instrument without in the least spoiling a concert. So that broken pot, Sundaram Iyer would have played an entire concert with it. And finally, he ends saying, I would close by appealing to all to make this instrument of Ghatam, to take up this instrument of Ghatam, and thus give this ancient instrument an honorable place. Sundaram, we go to the next slide, please. And Sundaram Iyer's dreams did come true, and when the Ghatam eventually, in 1966, it set foot on the global stage for the first time when Vikku Vinayak Ram sir, that's my guru's guru, accompanied M.S. Subbulakshmi at the historic concert in the UN General Assembly in New York. He later went on to become part of the fusion band Shakti, which took the world by the storm, and the rest we know is history. An article appeared in Tamil, which carried a report of this UN concert. And in Tamil it says, and this is what it translates into, it was titled, Indian Soil Spoke in the UN Assembly. And this Indian soil that spoke in the UN Assembly was from Manamadurai. It was this very soil that spoke in the UN. And finally, there's one more dimension to this Ghatam story. As I said earlier, percussion has always been considered a male domain. Women percussionists in Carnatic music, and there are only a handful whose names have been mentioned in passing, have only been footnotes in history. So as a woman Ghatam player, how do I trace my lineage? At this point, the journey of my guru Sukanya Ramgopal became a window that allowed me insights into the gendered history of percussion. when practice and pedagogy of an instrument is centered around the male body, how does a woman's body engage with it? What are the conflicts, the tensions that happen as part of this encounter? In the 1970s, when Sukanya ji started learning the Ghatam under Shri T.R. Harihara Sharma and then his son Vikku Vinayak Ram, there was considerable public debate on whether women can play the Ghatam, and more importantly, can and should Indian women play the Ghatam, and the catchword here is Indian. And I'll try and explain why. The first thing is that the Ghatam challenges in the manner that it is, in the material it is made of, in the manner it is played, it completely challenges all stereotypes about the woman's body, about having slender and soft fingers and wrists and all of that. And the second way in which it challenges ideas of the woman's body or received notions of the woman's body, or even the manner in which capitalism constructs ideas of the woman's body for us, is that if the instrument is an extension of the human body, then when you place the Ghatam in front of a woman's body, it can be two things. It is either an ugly body or it is a pregnant body. It is not, quote unquote, a normal body. So one of the things that is important, one of the main sounds in the Ghatam is this sound. When you actually, the mouth of the Ghatam is in contact with the skin. That's how the sound was meant to be produced. And if you look at old photographs, even here, a lot of men with unbuttoned shirts, or in most cases, they wouldn't wear an upper garment at all, so that the Ghatam is in touch with the body. So the question here is, how will women be able to do that? And moreover, how will Indian women do that? And that's what this fascinating article says, because I suppose they were also saying that it's okay for other women to bare their midriff, and it's not okay for Indian women. This is a morality issue. So Indian women will not be able to do that. As India's first woman Ghatam player, now we go to the next slide, please. As India's first woman Ghatam player, with a journey that spans over 5 decades, Sukanya ji's life as a Ghatam player has challenged long-held patriarchal views and has pushed the boundaries of pedagogy and practice for percussion in general and for the Ghatam specifically. Not just that, she has manifested the idea of the Ghata Tarang, where multiple Ghatams of different pitches are brought together to sing melodies. This act is hugely revolutionary because it put both the Ghatam and the woman percussionist front and center in Carnatic music. And for the Ghatam to come to the center, it did take a woman to do that. I'm also happy to share with you that my guru is here with me today. She's here among us. Thank you so much for all that you have done. This story of the Ghatam wouldn't have been complete without her. I'd like to close with just one small piece of information. Um, as we see in vocal music histories, gharana histories, compositions hold a lot of history as well. So studying a composition would become very important to understanding certain strands, certain trajectories of history. In that particular UN concert, which I mentioned, where MS Subbalakshmi was accompanied by T.K. Murthy sir on the mridangam and Vikku Vinayak Ram sir on the ghatam. And T.K. Murthy sir is a legend, he's a centenarian. He composed a finale for that concert, a final composition with which both of them were going to end the piece, end the whole percussion solos. And he composed it in a way that there was a lot of pause to enable the ghatam player to be able to toss the ghatam in the air. And this is how the composition goes. Dit tangadadagadarigadadaga dhinta tom, tangadadagadarigadadaga dhinta tom, tagadarigadadaga dhinta tom, ta, dhi, tom, nam, tom, takitatom, ta diginnatom, takitatom, ta diginnatom, takitatom, ta diginnatom, de tangadadagadarigadadaga dhinta tom, tangadadagadarigadadaga dhinta tom, tagadarigadadaga. I go again. Dit tangadadagadarigadadaga dhinta tom, tangadadagadarigadadaga. Dit tangadadagadarigadadaga dhinta tom, tarigidadi, tangadadagadarigadadaga dhinta tom, kedadagadarigadadi, tangadadagadarigadadaga dhinta tom, ta, kittati, di, takkita, dum, takkita, nam, takkita, dum, takkita, takkitatom, tadiginnatom, takkitatom, tadiginnatom, takkitatom, tadiginnatom, ta. So every time is a ta, di. That was the time when the ghatam would be tossed in the air. And this is the final composition that was played in that concert.
Thank you so much. This has been an absolutely fabulous 1 hour. We've learned so much. I really don't know where to begin. You've covered such wide ground with your performance, with the presentation, and just the perfect 1 hour for a history literature festival where we combine both music and history so closely. So thank you so much once again.
Just a second.
I'd like to invite Professor.
Do we have time? If we have a couple of minutes and if there is some questions or comments that anybody would like to share.
Yeah, let's do that actually. Anybody has
just 2-3 minutes, yeah.
Yeah, somebody at the back. Yeah.
Hello, ma'am. So, ma'am, my question is, now how many people are actually practicing this instrument, and are there any efforts taken by people or some group of people or bodies to preserve this art? Thank you.
You just have to say #Ghatam on Instagram, and you will see hundreds of them. Actually, because the Ghatam is so versatile, it's no longer only confined to Carnatic music. People are taking it up in fusion music spaces, in jazz music spaces, in all kinds of world music, everywhere, and everybody now seems to have fallen overly in love with this instrument. But that speaks about the versatility of the instrument. There are hundreds of them across the world who are doing it. But I must also say that there's very few of them, I think less than 10 women who are playing it in the world today.
Yeah, question here, sir.
There's no question, because I know the Guru also very well. She's also here. I am a disciple of T.K. Murthy.
Yes, I know that.
Okay. So I will be speaking tomorrow. Only one small correction. Karnamrta Sagaram author, Abraham Pandidar, lived in Tanjavur, not Tirunelveli. Kindly correct.
He was a he was
Yeah,
from
he was a practicing doctor
from
from
Tirunelveli.
Tanjavur.
Oh, I see.
Still there is
Okay.
a Abraham Pandidar Thotam there.
Okay.
So that's one factual this thing I thought
Okay.
I should
stand
bring it to your notice.
Sure.
Karnamrta Sagaram, he is a Christian by birth,
Yes.
and then he wrote Karnamrta Sagaram on Carnatic music because the ambience was like that.
Yeah.
Second, two good PhD theses have been recently published. One
Yes.
was a little early
Yeah.
by Karthik,
Correct.
and recently
Suresh.
Dr.
sir.
Suresh has brought out. I have put in lot of inputs there.
Okay.
So as the concert platform was emerging, there were a lot of players, so like Payani Krishnaya,
Yes.
and lot of, you can count about 40 to 50 people who were actually practicing. But even I have played with Alangudi Ramachandran. I have had an opportunity to accompany Chembai in 1960s. What I want to tell you is that their teams were very good. You know, Alangudi was playing for MS.
Yeah.
And for ML Vasantakumari, it was Vilwadri Ayyar.
Yes.
So there were a lot of very good players of Ghatam who actually attracted a lot of crowd, and the Taniyavartana was everywhere, it was a success.
Yes.
It was Krishnamurti Rao and Vilwadri, and of course my guru and Vikku Vinayagaram.
Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Only
Thank
bright-
you so much.
One question here. Yeah.
And just one thing to add to it is that from what you said, MS Subbalakshmi, ML Vasantakumari, DK Pantamal, Radha Jayalakshmi, Sulamangalam sisters, all of them are mostly accompanied by the Ghatam. And this is something that Vikku sir also told me, that actually the Ghatam grew up in the company of women.
First, thank you so much. It was fascinating.
Thank you.
The question I had was, I understand the people who make Ghatam are from the marginalized castes, right? But the people who play Ghatam, do they belong to a particular caste, and has that changed over time?
In the, I think it is in the 70s, if I remember right, there's actually a census that a very senior musicologist and musician, Rangaramana Iyengar, he undertakes a census, and at that point he says, he gives a percentage, and he says so and so mridangam players, this is the caste ratio and so on, and then he says 100% of the Ghatam players are Brahmins. This is what he says. I think it's in the 70s, but I'll get that information right. So one of the things, and this I can only conjecture at this point, is that the mridangam itself was taken over by the upper caste much later. As we know, it was played by people from the Devadasi community, by men of the Devadasi, men and women actually. There are a few women as well. And the Brahmins, because it was leather and it was forbidden to touch leather and so on. So the upper caste actually came in contact with the mridangam much later. And one of the things that one of the musicians told me is that while the slightly well-to-do upper caste people were attracted to the mridangam, the upper caste people who were interested in percussion but were not yet ready to touch leather, or were not in a position to afford a mridangam, because even those days the mridangam was expensive, those people started playing the Ghatam. And this is one of the things that we can sort of speak about that period. But I think now the composition has changed, and like I said, people from all over the world are playing it. Even within India, there's quite a wide variety of castes that have been playing it. But I must also say that a majority of them are still upper caste. But from what I have seen, from my own interactions and with the kinds of interactions that Ghatam players have had with the makers, it's quite a fascinating bond that they have. And there's so much respect and love for the makers. And the makers are almost like family to a lot of people. So that's something that I'm really proud of about this community.
Next question from Disha.
Yeah, so I have one question. I wanted to know, you showed potters who specialize making ghatam, right? So do they also make different forms of pots?
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Different kinds. Actually, from what Meenakshi Amma would always tell me, the making of the ghatams is not for their livelihood. And she would emphasize this. She said, we've got other things to take care of our lives. Like they make the clay stoves or diyas
regular
for
pots
Diwali
for
and
water.
other
Yeah,
kinds of pots, flower vases and all of that. But the ghatam, she would say, is purely for passion. And she would particularly say, you play with passion and we make because we are passionate about it. And the one line that she would always stress is, I don't want any ghatam player to go back from my house empty-handed. So if we talk about the practice, the commitment, the dedication of the artist, it's equal, and we should be talking about the commitment that the makers put into what they practice.
I just want to say one more thing, is that if an archaeologist were to find this
Sorry?
pot, if an archaeologist were to find
Yeah,
this
yeah.
or a sherd of this pot, we would describe very, technically.
Yes.
We would describe the carination, the burnishing, the polish, but nowhere we would imagine a pot could be a musical instrument. So perhaps we may now have to look back into archaeoliterature and see.
Sonically.
Yeah. Thank you
Definitely.
so much for this.
And because it's the most common instrument, it's a people's instrument, everybody had it at home, and it's impossible that a pot is not played on.
Yeah, actually Disha is an archaeologist and she's only used to seeing broken pots. So she's very happy to see a pot which is still in place. We have one question from this corner and she's also holding a memento. So you have to answer correctly, otherwise you won't get your
Ma'am,
memento.
just to last out.
I think we're getting this question and then...
Yes, here.
You
It's,
ask the question.
So I saw you playing the ghatam and I observed that it's a very controlled pressure that you apply to play it, right? Is the ghatam prone to breakage, and if so, how often, like while playing, does it break, if at all?
From what I know, and of course my guru will will endorse what I'm saying, it doesn't break while playing. I've never known of any instance, Ila ma'am. Never. It might, if it's already sort of weak, or if it's not baked properly, then there's a possibility that when you're playing, it will succumb to pressure a little bit. But I've not known of any instance where it's broken on stage. But there are high chances that it'll break out of negligence. You just put it down with a thud, and then it can just crack. And or when you're carrying it, if you're not careful about holding it, you hold it like a baby, basically. And so negligence can certainly break it. Otherwise, it's okay. And we know, like you were mentioning, shards of pottery are there from civilizations, from different civilizations. So it will not actually break unless there's a technical thing like this. It may just shatter the instrument, but no, they're very strong. But of course, while traveling in concerts as a group, sometimes in all good faith, you've entrusted your ghatam to somebody and then they have broken it. But otherwise, no. And we are very careful about who we entrust the ghatam to.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Professor Rakesh Basan to give Sumana ji a memento. And since we have Sukanya ji out here, we'd also like to invite you on stage so that we can put the History Literature Fest stole. And thank you so much for gracing.